Hello and welcome to Preconnotation Points video Snark. I'm continuing my read-through of The Plan by Qwen Salsbury. Please make sure that you've seen the other videos in my Snark series about the book before you jump into this one. Chapter 16, Day of Employment 376. Emma is up at 4:45 to go work out at the hotel's fitness center. I'm wondering what cosmic missteps I've taken to now find myself perpetually awake before God. I struggle to find any ounce of sympathy for her when she's the one making these decisions. I have committed myself to making personal progress, hitting the gym early enough to be done and leave it before the sun cracks over the horizon tests my resolve. Zero sympathy! You choose to wake up at that hour. You don't get to complain about it. And then Emma spends an unholy amount of time complaining about how unhealthy that her obsession with Alaric is, which is so frustrating because she knows this and yet she fails to do anything to try and stop herself. It's also frustrating because mainly I'm just sick and tired of hearing about it if all she's going to do is whine about it. And then the universe decides that it hates me and we're sent back to Emma's first day in the office. Bag, wallet, picture, best friend and self, makeup, notepad, lunch, hair clip. Nobody cares. Emma complains nonstop about how it was icy when she went to go into her first day of work and how there was traffic, about how people were constantly getting on and off the elevator. At this point, I think that this book is just 90% of Emma whining about stuff, just flat out whining because she's not doing anything to try and stop it. And I get that you can't help the ice, but you should know that it's December and plan for it. And you can't help the traffic, but you can leave earlier to help avoid some of it. And you can't help the people in the elevator, but maybe take the stairs or something. Later, Madeline gives Emma a tour of the office. As she's explaining break room policies to Emma, the latest assistant du jour wanders in, grabs coffee, and leaves. After she's gone, Madeline gives the too long didn't read explanation of the revolving door of Alaric's PAs and says that this one has lasted for a month, which is a long time. Later, Emma is introduced to both Bert and the company's PA bet at the same time. Cold-hearted and profitable. I have loans to pay, shoes to buy. She really needs to get her priorities straightened out. Before anybody can properly explain the betting pool system to Emma, Alaric shows up and Emma is instantly taken by how hot that he is, even though there's been 2 instances in her first day where she was like, wow, that guy sounds like an asshole, better stay away from him. Nothing quite like telling women that it's okay to be the most baggy person in the entire world so long as you're hot. Valuable lessons here. And yes, I'm being sarcastic. Back in the present, Emma shakes off the memory and curses the fact that treadmills leave too much time for trips down memory lane. A little while later, Emma eats her own breakfast before heading over to Alaric's room at exactly 6 a.m. Alaric is in the bathroom and Emma is excited over the fact that he might come out in some sort of state of undress. There's an awful lot of build-up to Alaric coming out of the bathroom, and then, he's fully dressed in his usual business suit. I honestly don't know what Emma was expecting. This isn't some porno. You'd hope that some big muckety-muck would understand how a woman might view him coming out in only a towel as being sexual harassment. Alaric is business as usual. He asks if Emma brought anything suitable to wear to a dinner meeting that night, as if Emma is some kind of idiot who couldn't read the itinerary. And then there's a bizarre moment when Alaric comments on the dress Emma mentions that she has, but that he hasn't actually seen, and Emma thinks Alaric assumes that she's some sort of whore. Please ask me no questions about this because I keep rereading it and it makes 0 sense. You know, much like half of this book so far. Much later in the day, Emma and Alaric are talking with some big hotshot at the company, and the guy apparently likes to overshare about literally everything from his recently dead dog to his age-related health problems. Emma is bored to tears, and I hope that you can imagine my joy upon getting to read about her boredom. Although Emma insisted that somebody checking out her butt at a meeting that morning seemed better in comparison to now. Finally, the guy leaves, and Alaric and Emma are alone for a moment. They sit there in awkward silence for a moment before Emma smiles at him, more in a holy shit that's finally over way than anything else. Alaric returns her smile for a moment. Emma finally asks if she can get him anything to drink. Half an hour later, the guy still hasn't returned, which frustrates Alaric something fierce. Although, unlike with his usual frustrations, I get this one at least. They eventually decide to leave when it becomes clear that the other guy won't be coming back. That evening, Emma and Alaric are at the aforementioned dinner meeting. The restaurant and food are insanely fancy, as you might imagine. My recommendation is that we begin with one Diana Fraulein, VP of Marketing. On display in blatant flirtation attempts with the males. She's the embodiment of every negative connotation with female executives. Giant step backwards for the women's movement. My problem with this isn't so much that these kinds of women don't exist. I've personally never met one, but I'm sure that they do exist. No, my problem is that Salsbury didn't have to include this kind of sexism, but yet here we are anyway. It is an all-you-can-eat restaurant. All you can eat meat. Meat. Fraulein wants the only kind not on the menu. Her attempts would only be more obvious if she stuffed her panties directly into Cannon's mouth. I had to read this, and so do you. Most of the evening has been pleasant enough. Cannon is beside me, so I'm spared his judgmental looks. I do get a few errant brushes from Fraulein's heels when her attempts to play footsie with my boss go astray. Because this is what we're doing now, apparently. The waiter comes by to offer them all more steak. He stares down the other lady's top, because of course he does. When Emma refuses the steak, the waiter comes back with chicken. And the story has gotten to the point where I cannot tell if the rude things are said in Emma's head, or if the others that they're out with literally looked at a business associate's assistant and thought, this seems like an okay thing to say. I'm not going to unpack any of that because the suitcase deserves to be burned as it is. Despite the waiter's continued attempts to stare down the other lady's top, he continues to try and figure out something to bring out for Emma. This prompts the other lady to joke around about getting the waiter's number for Emma. But her boorish behavior finally hits Alaric's limit. He then announces that they have to go and begins to leave. The others there don't seem to understand how their behavior might be seen as offensive and joke around with Alaric about it. And when the other lady asks if she would be seeing Alaric later, Emma both loves and hates the idea of somebody keeping him occupied. At 11 that night, Emma reflects on their return to the hotel, in silence. She went to her room to catch up on her lecture for the day, but she felt kind of disappointed that Alaric failed to call her after they got back. Chapter 17, Day of Employment 377. Emma wakes herself up at 3 a.m. with another nightmare, and I'm at the point where either Salsbury had better explain what these nightmares are about, or else I legit don't give a f***. In my youth, they happened all the time, always different, but with one important element often the same. Mr. Lincoln. Dude is scary. Just picture him out in a field, stoic eyes and stovepipe hat staring. Shudder. Tonight he was in the closet. Not like that. Waiting. Breathing. Getting beard hairs on all of my borrowed business clothes. Then Abe makes his presence known, dumped thousands of pennies on me, drank all Cannon's coffee. Yeah, I'm messed up. Other people get nightmares with mangy-furred werewolves tearing the shingles from the roof. I'm terrorized by Abraham fucking Lincoln. I take it back. I want to go back to a minute ago before I knew that this existed. Also, this girl needs therapy. Like a decade ago. And since Emma knows that she wouldn't be able to get back to sleep, she decides to go down to the fitness center. And I just had a weird thought, but Emma is willing to change literally every single aspect of herself for some slim chance that Alaric will not only notice her, but also fall madly in love with her. But she won't do anything in order to, help herself. Can't possibly imagine why anybody wouldn't want to help cure their phobia of Abraham Lincoln. Okay, I'm sorry. I cannot take that seriously. I thought that Emma's nightmares were going to open the door to something intense and serious and that the book might suddenly become interesting. But then we get Afraid of Abraham Lincoln. At 7, Emma is with Alaric again. I will need those figures from corporate. He's straightening his tie in the mirror. They're in your email as well as hard copies in my case. The tie is not cooperating. They don't do me any good in your case. I'm sorry, then why didn't you ask for the hard copies to be given to you? I don't have a lot of sympathy for a man who demands so much of his employees, and one of those things is apparently mind reading. But then Emma gives him the hard copies, which is what she'd been working on in an earlier chapter. that is to say, the unholy amount of paper, which she drops onto the desk with a satisfying thud, and it startles Alaric. Good. She then fixes his tie because, as I mentioned in an earlier chapter, this man is so incompetent I have no idea how he manages to function. They then go back to the offices, and I'm way beyond the point of caring about that. I hate to say this, but can we just get to the banging already? There is literally nothing happening. Later, Emma yells at the deli delivery man for having put honey mustard on Alaric's sandwich. Alaric shows up just as the man leaves and asks if everything's okay. Would you like a drink, Miss Baker? Knock me over with a feather. Yes, actually I would. Good. Pick me up one too, he says and disappears into the conference room. And here we see him swinging from incompetent back to asshole. Emma is in bed by 9 p.m. and of course that's when Alaric decides that he needs those documents and those and some of those as well. Now! Clara's robe is a beautiful black kimono. I don't own a robe, so it's better than none. However, I see now that it's rather sheer as in see-through. Nobody was confused as to what sheer meant, but thanks, I guess. Despite the fact that Emma insists that her nightgown covers everything, she still pulls on the aforementioned robe and goes across the hall to Alaric's room. There, he's insanely and unreasonably offended that she dared to show up like that. Is it fair to parade around in lingerie? He paces, his shoulders brush against the curtains. This is not lingerie. I reach in the robe and pull out the very non-see-through corner of my gown. Trust me, if I wore lingerie, you'd know it. You may have boundary issues. I should have redirected you after you showed up in my room the first day. Alaric isn't wrong about Emma struggling to see lines in the sand, but I feel as though him calling her after 9 p.m. and demanding that she come over to his room right then is not a boundary issue. This is an I have a boss who's a controlling jerkwad issue. Emma then gives him the files he demanded and then calls him out on his bullshit. Mr. Cannon, with all due respect, you have made it abundantly clear that I am to do as you say when you say it, without question. He starts to talk, but I don't know why I lose control of my person, and I don't know what possesses him, but I hold up my hand to stop him from talking, and he actually does. It is abundantly clear that seeing me like this is distasteful to you. In the future, I will take the time to fully dress and suffer your wrath for the delay rather than forcing you to look at me when it is evident that you find the view so distasteful. Yes, Queen. Alaric calls her about half an hour later to tell her the oh-so-important that it couldn't wait until morning news of the fact that they've been invited to lunch. It's as stilted and awkward conversation as it should be. Perhaps of vastly more importance, with good reason, is to find a moment that satisfies this fixation I have about wanting him to notice me, so I can then get back to being a well-adjusted, contributing member of society, or a reasonable facsimile thereof. Now, Emma exists in a vacuum. That is to say that she doesn't exist before this story started, and she won't exist once this story is done. We have no mental health history to bring up to the front, and we can't do follow-ups in the same way that we could do in an actual person. However, I feel as though it wouldn't be all that odd if I was to say that Emma going back to normal seems highly unlikely. She's this obsessed with one person. If she somehow managed to get over him, it would not surprise me at all if somebody were to say that she turned her stalkerish behavior towards somebody else. Anyway, Emma thinks about how this raise had better be worth it and thinks that she should have asked for hazard pay. Honestly, Emma should tell them, raise or face a hefty lawsuit for these working conditions. And then, because this chapter hates me, she can't even go to sleep at 11 p.m. No, this continues on past 1 a.m. Emma describes a dream that she's having in which Alaric comes to her room. He asks if she's cold and offers to get her another blanket, but she says no. She then offers to come to his room later to snuggle with him, but he says that he doesn't even do that with his girlfriend. And bro, even your subconscious is telling you to stay away from this man. We can't even have an actual wet dream, and instead she cock-blocks herself. He leaves, and Emma seems to sink into a deeper dream to unpack all that had happened during her day. This lasts for a few sentences before the mood shifts back to Alaric, and I think that we're finally getting the promised wet dream. She's still in the hotel room, but there are candles everywhere, as well as garlands. They start touching one another, but if there's any sort of hanky-panky going on, it's not described in any sort of detail. And if I get any more aggressively juvenile with these fantasies, I'm going to need to invest in some Clearasil and lube. Alrighty then. This manages to wake Emma up, and she's like, "What the hell, brain?" The chapter ends on this attempt at humor. Unlike John Wilkes Booth, I may actually miss Lincoln. Your joke is bad and you should feel bad. Things are happening. Are they important? No. Do I care about any of it? Nope. Do I care what happens to Emma? Honestly, no. The same with Alaric, or literally anything else in this book at this point. I feel like this book is like a hamster working out in a wheel. It's running and running, but no matter how hard it runs, it never actually goes anywhere.